Hey everyone, and welcome back to Case Uncovered, where we uncover some of the most compelling and lesser-known cases. I'm your host, Jen Rivera, and this is Missing in the Midwest, a series where I cover missing persons cases in Chicago, Illinois, and surrounding areas across the Midwest to help bring more awareness to these cases. These episodes drop every Tuesday, and the goal is simple: to continue sharing the stories of people who are still missing and whose families are still searching for answers. Today's case takes us to Chicago's South Side, where two sisters disappeared on a summer morning in 2001. One was 10 years old, the other was just 3. Their mother left for work believing her daughters were safe inside their home. But when she returned, the apartment was empty. The girls were gone. And the only clue investigators found was a note that raised more questions than answers. This is the disappearance of Tionda and Diamond Bradley. Our story begins on July 6, 2001 in Chicago's Bronzeville neighborhood near 35th Street and Cottage Grove. Bronzeville is one of those areas in Chicago where life is constantly moving. Families, neighbors, kids playing outside, people going to work, coming home. It's a lived-in community. And it's also an area that's personally familiar to me. It's the area from where my Aunt Linda lived and where she would later disappear earlier this year. So when I first looked into this case and saw the location, it immediately hit differently. Because when something like this happens in a place you know, it stops feeling distant. It feels real. And that's exactly what this case is. Real. Because inside one of those apartment units that morning was a family. A mother raising her children, trying to balance work, life, and responsibility like so many others. Tracy Bradley was a mother of 4. That morning, 2 of her daughters, Rita and Victoria, were staying with their grandmother. So inside the apartment that day were just 2 of her girls, 10-year-old Tionda and 3-year-old Diamond. The girls were half-sisters, but like so many siblings in blended families, that distinction didn't matter. They were sisters. And from everything shared over the years, Tionda took that role seriously. She was protective, responsible, the kind of older sister who looked out for their younger one. Diamond, on the other hand, was still a toddler. Curious, playful, completely dependent on the people around her. Before leaving for work that morning, Tracy gave her daughters clear instructions. Do not go anywhere, and do not open the door for anyone. It was a rule, one meant to keep them safe. Because at 10 years old, Tionda was old enough to understand responsibility, but still young enough to be vulnerable. And at 3 years old, Diamond depended entirely on that protection. The morning likely felt routine. Quiet, normal, nothing out of place. Nothing to suggest that anything was about to go wrong. But by the time Tracy returned home later that day, that normal morning had turned into something no parent is ever prepared for. The apartment was still, silent, and both of her daughters were gone. Inside the apartment, there was one thing left behind that would quickly become one of the most important and most debated pieces of this entire case: a handwritten note. It appeared to have been written by 10-year-old Tionda. In it, she explained that she and her little sister had gone to the store and to the nearby school playground, and that they would be back later. At first, it reads almost like something simple: a child trying to explain where she's going. A quick note to avoid getting in trouble. Something that, on the surface, might not immediately raise alarm. But the more you sit with it, the more questions begin to surface. Because this wasn't just a 10-year-old stepping out for a few minutes. This was a 10-year-old responsible for a 3-year-old child. And anyone who had been around a toddler knows you don't just casually take them out without thinking through every step. You don't take your eyes off of them. You move quickly. Everything requires your attention. So the idea that the girls would leave walk through the neighborhood, go to multiple locations, and not be seen by anyone, well, that's where things begin to feel off. Then there's the tone of the note itself. It's calm, matter of fact. There's no urgency, no indication that anything unusual is happening. It reads like everything is completely normal. But when the locations mentioned were checked, there were no sign of the girls. No one who remembered seeing them. And that's when the note stops feeling like an explanation. It starts feeling like a question. Because if the note is accurate, someone should have seen them. And if it isn't, then it may not be telling the story we think it is. And that's when the focus shifted outside the apartment and when the search initially begins. The initial approach was straightforward. Start with the locations mentioned in the note: the playground, the store, the surrounding streets, the paths the girls might have taken if they had left on their own. People began searching these areas almost immediately, walking the blocks, looking around places where children would typically go. But those early efforts didn't bring the reassurance anyone was hoping for. There were no confirmed sightings. No one who could say that they saw the girls walking together that morning. No one who remembered passing them or noticing them nearby. And in a neighborhood where people are used to seeing each other, where movement doesn't go unnoticed, that absence started to stand out. Because it's not just about what people saw, it's about what they didn't see. 2 young children moving through the area should have left some kind of trace, a memory, a sighting, something. But there was nothing to anchor that timeline outside of the note. And without that confirmation, the search began to lose direction almost as quickly as it started. Because now the question wasn't just, where are they? It became, were they ever there at all? And that question would change everything moving forward. Real quick, before we continue with the case, I want to share something that's been part of my routine lately. The weather is finally starting to break here in Chicago. Well, at least it was a few days ago. Now we're in the middle of a blizzard. But we actually did have our first 70-degree day a few days ago, which means more walks to the park and more time outside. And as a sexual assault survivor, personal safety is always something that's on my mind when I'm out by myself, when I'm out with friends, when I'm out with my kids. It's always on my mind. One thing I always keep with me is my Safely Sidekick. The Safely Sidekick is a compact personal safety device that includes pepper spray, a personal alarm, a built-in flashlight, a glass breaker, and a keychain ring, all in one easy-to-carry tool designed to help you stay prepared if you ever find yourself in an uncomfortable or unsafe situation. It's small enough to clip into your keys or your bag, which makes it really convenient to keep with you whether you're heading out for a walk, going for a run, going to the park with your kids, or just running errands. If you want to check it out, you can visit livesafely.co and use my code JEN for 10% off your order. I'll also include the link and the code in the show notes. Thank you to Safely for sponsoring today's episode. Now, let's get back to the case. As the day went on, the search expanded. What started with nearby streets quickly grew into something much larger. People began checking areas beyond the immediate surroundings: vacant buildings, alleyways, abandoned structures, places that aren't always visible at first glance, but can't be overlooked when children are missing. At the same time, the community began stepping in. Neighbors walked the blocks calling the girls' names. People checked garages, stairwells, and entryways. Flyers started circulating. And suddenly, the entire neighborhood became part of the search. Because when something like this happens, it doesn't stay contained. It spreads. It affects everyone. Parents look at their own children differently. People become more aware of their surroundings. Every unfamiliar face, every unfamiliar car starts to stand out. But even with that level of attention, there was still nothing. No confirmed direction, no location that gave a clear answer, just an expanding search that kept getting bigger without getting closer. And that's when the focus began to shift again, because if the girls weren't being found outside, then maybe the answers weren't out there at all. At this point, everything came back to one thing: the timeline. Not just where the girls were supposed to go, but when they actually left, because that window of time holds everything. The note suggests they had already gone out, but without anyone confirming that, that assumption couldn't be treated as fact. So the question became more precise. When did they leave? And just as important, did they ever really leave at all? That uncertainty created a major shift in how the case had to be looked at, because if no one saw them outside, then it opens the possibility that whatever happened didn't happen out there. It may have happened before that moment ever occurred, inside the apartment, inside the building. And that's what makes this case so complex, because when the starting point is unclear, everything that follows becomes harder to piece together. Every theory, every lead, every possibility. They all depend on a timeline that doesn't fully connect. And without that foundation, the entire case begins to feel like it's missing its first piece, which leads to the question that still hasn't been answered. When a case has as many unanswered questions as this one, it's natural to start asking, what are the possible explanations? Because without a confirmed timeline and without witnesses placing the girls outside, there isn't just one direction to look at, there are several. One possibility is that the girls did leave the apartment on their own, just as the note suggested. That Tionda, trying to be responsible, made the decision to take her sister to the playground or the store. But if that were the case, the question becomes, why did no one see them? In a neighborhood, especially during the summer, where everyone is outside, two young children walking together should have easily been seen. Another possibility is that someone came to the apartment, someone the girls may have recognized. Because at 10 years old, Tionda may have been cautious, but she also may have opened the door for someone she trusted. A neighbor, a familiar face, someone who lived in the building. And that leads to another possibility that some people have considered over the years, that the girls may have been taken by someone inside the building itself, someone who knew them, someone who had access, someone who could have invited them in without raising immediate concern. And if that were the case, it raises an even more unsettling question about the note. Because if the girls never actually left to go to the playground or the store, then what if that note wasn't just a simple explanation? What if it was a diversion? A way to make it seem like the girls had gone outside? A way to shift attention toward the streets, the playground, the surrounding neighborhood? While in reality, they may have still been inside the building, in another apartment, hidden in plain sight, giving whoever was responsible time to figure out their next move, time to relocate them, time to remove them from the area entirely while everyone was focused on searching outside. There is also the possibility of a stranger abduction, someone passing through, someone who saw an opportunity, someone who approached the girls either inside the building or shortly after they stepped outside. While rare, cases like that do happen, and when they do, they often leave very little behind. No witnesses, no clear timeline, just questions. And that's what makes this case so difficult, because without knowing exactly when the girls left, or if they ever made it outside at all, there isn't one clear theory. There are several, and each one points in a completely different direction. But if the note wasn't telling the truth, then the search may have started in the wrong place from the very beginning. As the search continued, the investigation began expanding beyond Chicago, because when children disappear under circumstances that cannot be immediately explained, investigators have to consider the possibility that they may have been taken and transported somewhere else. The FBI became involved, assisting local authorities in analyzing evidence and following up on potential leads. Missing person alerts and flyers began circulating throughout Chicago and eventually across other parts of the country. Photos of the girls appeared on television broadcasts and in newspapers. Their faces were shared in the hope that someone might recognize them. Tips began coming in from members of the public. Some people believed they had seen the girls somewhere in the city. Others reported possible sightings in neighboring states. Each lead was carefully investigated, but like many high-profile missing persons cases, most of those tips ultimately led nowhere. Still, detectives continued pursuing every possibility, because in investigations like this, even the smallest detail can sometimes unlock the truth. Over time, investigators began examining every aspect of the case again and again. One of the most puzzling pieces of evidence remained the handwritten note. Detectives analyzed the handwriting and wording carefully. They asked questions about when the note might have been written. They considered whether the message accurately described the girl's plans that morning, or whether it might have been written for another reason entirely. Another challenge investigators faced was the lack of witnesses. In a busy city neighborhood, it's unusual for two young children to walk through the area without anyone noticing. Yet, despite extensive interviews with residents and businesses, no one could confirm seeing the sisters that day. That gap in information created one of the central mysteries of the case. Why did no one see the girls if they truly did go outside to the store or the playground? And if they didn't make it there, then what really happened before they had the chance to leave? These are the questions that investigators have continued asking for more than 2 decades. Today, the disappearance of Tionda and Diamond Bradley remains one of Chicago's most heartbreaking unsolved cases. More than 2 decades have passed since that summer morning. Over the years, investigators have released age-progressed images showing what the sisters might look like today. These images are created by forensic artists who study the girls' features and estimate how they may have changed over time. The goal is simple: to help someone recognize them. Because in some missing persons cases, answers come years later. A witness remembers something they once dismissed as important. Someone finally comes forward with information they were afraid to share. Or investigators uncover evidence that had been overlooked before. Today, Tionda would be in her 30s and Diamond would be in her 20s. 2 sisters who should have grown up together. 2 daughters who should have had the chance to live full lives. But instead, their story has remained frozen in time on a summer morning in Chicago. A morning when 2 young sisters were inside their home, and by the end of the day, they were simply gone. Over the years, there have been moments where it felt like answers might finally come. In 2019, a woman came forward claiming she was Tionda Bradley. And for a family that has been searching for answers for years, that kind of moment brings hope. Real hope. The kind of hope that makes you believe this might finally be it. That maybe, after all this time, there could be answers. The family traveled to meet her. They did what any family would do. They showed up, they were open, they were honest, and they were ready. But after DNA testing, it was confirmed she was not Tionda. And just like that, another lead, another possibility, another moment of hope was taken away. And for this family, that's the reality they've had to live with for more than 2 decades. Hope, followed by heartbreak. For families of missing persons, time doesn't really move on the way it does for everyone else. The questions are still there. The hope for answers is still there. And the search for the truth never truly stops. That's why continuing to share cases like this is so important. Because sometimes the person who holds the key to what happened may not even realize it yet. And even the smallest piece of information could help move this investigation forward. If you have any information about the disappearance of Diamond and Tionda Bradley, you can contact the Chicago Police Department at 312-747-5789. Even the smallest detail could help. Thank you so much for joining me for this episode of Case Uncovered's Missing in the Midwest series. If you'd like to keep hearing cases like this, make sure you follow or subscribe to Case Uncovered wherever you listen to podcasts so you never miss an episode. And whether you've been listening for a while or you're just discovering the show, one of the most meaningful ways you can support this work is by leaving a 5-star rating and review. Case Uncovered is an independent podcast, and every rating and review helps more people find the show and helps these cases reach a wider audience. That visibility truly matters when it comes to keeping stories like this in the public eye. And if you'd like to learn more about the advocacy work I'm doing through the Reignited Project, or if you're interested in getting involved, you can visit thereignitedproject.com. And just a side note, I will be attending the Beyond the Crime convention taking place in Albuquerque, New Mexico, April 11th and 12th. Tickets are still available. If you're interested in purchasing, I'll make sure I leave the link in the show notes below. I'd love to see you there. I'll have a booth and will be speaking as well. Thank you again for listening and for helping keep these stories alive. And remember, stay curious, stay vigilant, and stay safe out there.